Daniel Carter had always been drawn to places others avoided. As a child, he had wandered through empty houses, fascinated by the silence. Where his friends saw ruins, Daniel saw stories waiting to be uncovered. At 32, he had turned that fascination into work. Independent documentaries about urban legends, lost places, and the strange truths buried beneath rumors. Of all the legends he had collected, none had haunted him more than Hollowstone Asylum. He first heard its name whispered by his grandmother, who warned him never to go near the building. That place doesn't just remember pain, she would say, her voice trembling. It feeds on it. Daniel had laughed at the time, but the story stayed with him, lingering at the back of his mind. Hollowstone sat on the outskirts of a dying town, its skeletal silhouette visible even from the highway. Locals refused to go near it. Children dared each other to touch its rusted gates, but none ever went inside. The building had been closed for 60 years after the fire. Officially, it was electrical failure. Unofficially, the survivors whispered about the screams in the basement, about a doctor who never stopped working, about patients who vanished into shadows. On an October night, heavy with mist, Daniel arrived at the asylum. His backpack carried a flashlight, an audio recorder, spare batteries, and his trusted camera. He approached the gates, which loomed higher than he remembered from childhood photographs. The metal was brittle with rust, but as he pushed, it opened with a groan so deep, it seemed like a warning. The courtyard was overgrown. Weeds choked the cracked pavement. A fountain, once elegant, was nothing more than a stone basin filled with black water. The building itself towered over him. 3 stories of broken windows and charred stone. It looked like a skull against the night sky, hollow and watchful. Daniel lifted his camera, began to narrate. His voice shook slightly, but he pressed on. October 14, 11:45 p.m. This is Daniel Carter. I've entered the grounds of Hollowstone Asylum. Local legends speak of cruelty, experiments, and an unexplained fire in 1961. Tonight, I'll be documenting the truth. The front door stood slightly open. He stepped inside. The air hit him immediately. Thick, heavy, wet with the mildew. It smelled of rot, rust, and something metallic, almost like dried blood. His flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing the main hall. Broken furniture lay scattered like corpses. Wheelchairs rusted in corners. Faded murals of smiling patients decorated the walls, their faces peeling and warped by fire. Daniel set down his recorder, spoke again. The silence here is unnatural. The atmosphere feels heavy, almost watchful. He lifted the recorder, replayed the audio. His own voice echoed back, followed by something else. A whisper, one word. Welcome. Daniel froze. The hall was empty. His beam swept across shattered windows, collapsed plaster, but there was no one. He replayed it again. The whisper was there, clear. He pressed forward. Room by room, he documented what he saw. Patient files scattered across the floor, half burned. Beds with leather restraints bolted into the floor. Graffiti from trespassers, but beneath it, something older. Carvings etched into stone. Circles, symbols, faces, twisted in silent screams. In a ruined office, he found a folder. The label read, Lyle's Margaret. The record ended mid-sentence. Subject has shown resistance to procedure. Further action required. The handwriting broke off, as though the pen had been torn away mid-stroke. Beside it lay a photograph, blackened at the edges. A woman strapped to a bed, eyes wide with terror. A loud slam echoed. The office door had closed. Daniel spun, flashlight jerking wildly. For an instant, in the far corner, a figure stood, a pale woman, hollow eyes, her mouth stretched open in a soundless scream. The light flickered, steadied, and she was gone. Daniel's heart thundered. His instinct screamed to leave, but his obsession pushed him deeper. The corridors twisted. The further he walked, the colder it became, until each breath puffed white mist before him. His footsteps echoed too loudly, as though the building wanted him to know he was trespassing. The recorder captured more than silence now. Faint voices, dozens of them, overlapping whispers. Stay. Don't leave. Join us. He tried to steady his breathing. His grandmother's warnings echoed in his mind, but his camera was rolling, and he couldn't stop. The stairs to the basement groaned under his weight. The descent felt endless. The air down there was colder still, unnaturally so. Chains dangled from the ceiling, swaying though there was no breeze. The walls bore more carvings. Faces, hundreds of them, scratched violently into stone. Daniel lifted his recorder. The voices were clearer now. Help us. Don't let him see you. He's still here. A chill cut through him. Turning a corner, Daniel stumbled into a surgical room. An operating table stood in the center, stained dark. Rusted scalpels, bone saws, and needles lay scattered. Above them, words carved in jagged letters. We never left. His flashlight flickered, then cut out completely. In the blackness, he heard chains rattle. Slow footsteps echoed across the floor. He spun, fumbling with the light. When it flared back on, a figure stood across the room, tall, thin, clad in a doctor's coat, blackened with soot. His face was shadowed, but his eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Daniel whispered, "Doctor." Graven. The figure tilted its head and then vanished. Panic clawed at Daniel. He turned toward the stairs, but every corridor brought him back to the same place. The asylum was twisting around him, alive, rearranging itself. His watch spun wildly, minutes bled into hours. He could no longer tell how long he had been walking. In one room, he found another recorder, old, dust-caked. He pressed play, static hissed, then a man's voice. Officer Thomas Ray entered Hollowstone November 3rd, 1974. Searching for missing teens. Found. Faces in the walls. Voices. God help me. They're not gone. I hear them every night. The tape cut into a scream. Daniel dropped it. He realized the officer never left. None of them had. The halls narrowed, twisting into a maze. Shadows shifted along the edges of his light. He began to hear footsteps behind him. Though each time he turned, the corridor was empty. At one point, his camera caught a glimpse. Figures lining the walls, their faces pale, their mouths moving silently, watching. Finally, after what felt like days, he stumbled into a massive chamber. Chains lined the walls. An altar stood at its center, candles burned down to stubs, their wax hardened decades ago. On the altar lay a patient's gown, soaked dark with old stains. Daniel's breath hitched. His light caught something else. A woman. Her skin was gray, her body twisted. Her eyes opened with a snap. Margaret Lyles. "You came," she whispered, her voice layered with dozens of others. "We've been waiting." Daniel backed away, but the chamber door slammed shut. Chains rattled. Shadows surged from the corners. Margaret sat up, her movements jerky, inhuman. "You shouldn't have come alone," she hissed. "Now you're one of us." The candles flared, though no flame touched them. His recorder screamed with voices. His flashlight burst. Darkness swallowed everything. Daniel's scream tore through the chamber. Then silence. Weeks later, explorers found his camera just outside the asylum gates. The footage documented his journey, ending abruptly with his scream, followed by nothing. But those who dare approach Hollowstone at night swear they can still hear his voice on the wind. Stay. Don't leave. Join us. And sometimes, another voice joins. A woman's voice. We've been waiting. The silence after the final scream was worse than the scream itself. Hollowstone Asylum seemed to exhale, its broken windows shivering with a hollow wind that did not come from outside. Daniel had felt the building claim him, its walls bending, its shadows deepening, its very floors shifting beneath his boots. He was no longer sure whether he was walking inside a ruin or inside a memory, but the asylum did not care. It had him, and that was enough. At first, Daniel believed he was alive. His chest rose and fell with frantic breaths. His hands trembled as they touched the damp wallpaper, peeling in long strips. But something was wrong when he leaned against a mirror in the corridor. His reflection was hazy, slow to follow his movements. And when it finally looked at him, it smiled, though he did not. The air pressed against him like water. Every step echoed too long, too loud. He whispered to himself, anything, just to fill the silence. You're okay. You're okay. But his voice sounded doubled, as if another man was whispering with him a half second later. A man deeper, raspier. The corridors did not end. Doors repeated themselves. Room numbers looped like a skipping record. 211, 214, 217. Then back to 211 again. He tried leaving scratches on the wall with a rusted nail he'd found, but the next time he returned, the scratches had moved, carved into the wrong doors, as if the asylum itself was mocking his attempt to map it. Daniel had read about Hollowstone's reputation, how patients vanished, how doctors disappeared into the lower wings. But now, he realized those stories had been the mild version. The asylum was not merely haunted. It was alive, breathing, rewriting itself with every blink. Nights bled into days, or maybe it was all one endless night. Daniel could not tell. He found food, sealed tins in a nurse's station, though the labels were decades old. He forced himself to eat, though the meat inside tasted of rust and ash. Water dripped from a pipe, black-tinged metallic, but he swallowed it anyway because thirst was worse. Yet he never felt stronger. Hunger always returned, and the water never eased his throat. Perhaps, he thought, his body no longer needed sustenance at all. The voices began on the seventh day, or what he thought was the seventh. At first, distant, then closer. Whispers in the vents, hushed lullabies from behind locked doors. Sometimes, when he dared to peek through the window slots, he saw eyes staring back. Dozens of them. Some human, some stretched too wide, too black, reflecting no light at all. He found journals scattered across the floors like breadcrumbs, pages torn, some water damaged, but legible enough to read fragments. They spoke of Dr. Margaret Vale, the physician whose obsession with curing insanity had driven her to rituals, blood rites, experiments carved into the flesh of the forgotten. Patients had been sacrificed, their screams written into the very mortar of the asylum. And Daniel realized, with growing dread, that Hollowstone was not just a place. It was a vessel, a cage filled with every soul Margaret had bound to it. And now, he was among them. He tried to leave. God, how he tried. Every stairwell led deeper instead of up. Every exit door opened onto the same hallway he had left behind. Once, in desperation, he smashed a window with a metal chair and leapt through, only to crash onto the floor of the same hallway he had been escaping. He lay there for hours, ribs aching, mind spinning, until he laughed. A hollow, broken laugh. The asylum laughed back. Daniel's dreams became worse than waking. He saw Margaret herself, her pale face emerging from shadows, eyes like polished bone. She whispered promises of release if he surrendered. He resisted, clinging to memory. His childhood home, his sister's voice, the taste of coffee on a winter morning. But memory faded. Each day it slipped further away, replaced with Margaret's whispers, with the asylum's heartbeat echoing in his ears. One night, if it was night at all, he awoke to find his reflection standing outside of him. The mirror had cracked, and the version of Daniel within it crawled free, dripping with black fluid, eyes hollow. It walked with him, step for step. It spoke when he would not. Soon, Daniel wasn't sure which of them was real. The building grew colder. The whispers became screams. Chains rattled in empty cells. Figures began to follow him, some crawling, some dragging themselves on shattered limbs. He locked himself in rooms, pressed his ear to the door as fingernails scratched from the other side. He whispered prayers, though he no longer remembered the words. And then, the final revelation came. In the deepest corridor, beneath a stairwell that seemed to spiral endlessly downward, Daniel found the ritual chamber, symbols carved in the stone, dried blood staining the floor in circles. At the center, an altar. On the altar, a single half-rotted patient file. His name was written across it. Daniel Whitaker, but the date shocked him most. Admitted, October 12th, 1963. 60 years ago. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Photographs of him strapped to a bed, screaming, notes of progress in Margaret's handwriting. A final line scrawled across the bottom. Subject now fully integrated. Host will remain within Hollowstone, eternally preserved. Daniel stumbled back, chest heaving. He was not a visitor. He was not an investigator. He had always belonged here. His memories of the outside world were illusions, threads Margaret had sewn into his mind to keep him docile. His life had never been real. The asylum had birthed him, fed him false hopes, and claimed him the moment he stepped inside. The walls pulsed, the altar bled, and Margaret appeared, her face hovering inches from his, lips curling into a smile that had no warmth. "You see now," she whispered, "you were never meant to leave. You're mine. Hollowstone is you." Daniel tried to scream, but his voice joined the choir of countless others, echoing endlessly in the halls, merging with the asylum's eternal lament. His body dissolved into shadow, his mind fractured, and in that moment, he understood. He had not discovered Hollowstone. Hollowstone had discovered him, and it would never let him go.